highlight thanking Sierra Club of Canada and Dogwood Initiative for the work they do. I mean, help. So, making sense of the slick. I will trespass very little on things that you've heard already, and certainly not try not to repeat things that Geoff has said. They're in the same category. But I did want to start with Sarah Palin. I can't help it. I just, you know, when the BP oil spill, when the disaster began, and the rig is on fire, and you think, okay, I thought to myself, you know, what will those dastardly Republicans who stood chanting, drill, baby, drill, where will they go to hide their faces? Will they have the decency to say we were wrong? We're really sorry we pushed so hard to drill in fragile ecosystems. But of course, within days, Sarah Palin was showing her face and saying, I never trusted those foreign oil companies. Literally, wink, wink. So there you go, no shame. And there is, of course, the predictable campaign to demonize BP as the culprit. And I'll leave all those comments aside because Geoff has covered that ground. I do think there's an interesting story about BP, which is not being focused on in this whole disaster. And so what I want to address my comments on is basically corporate culture and general governmental servitude to corporations as the operating model for governments around the world, especially Canada. So, but the BP story, there's a sadness to it for me, because for one brief period, BP was actually serious about reducing climate change, greenhouse gases, and addressing the climate crisis. And it was when they had a CEO named Lord John Browne, who, as you can imagine from the name Lord John Browne, is very British. And I think from about the mid-90s till about 2005, he was trying to lead British Petroleum in the direction of being beyond petroleum. They actually were making investments to reduce greenhouse gases, and they had a corporate target to reduce greenhouse gases by 10% below 1990 levels by 2010. A lot, yes, skullduggery in Alaska, no question. BP did not do well with oil pipelines that needed maintenance. But what's interesting here is how much the board of directors did not like the direction John Browne was taking them. Tony Hayward was already in the firm, and it was very clear the board of directors did not like the idea of beyond petroleum. They did not like the idea of being an oil company that was calling for Kyoto, calling for carbon taxes, telling Tony Blair, make the regulations tougher. Those were real things that were going on. And the irony that they managed to get rid of Lord John Browne through allegations that his homosexuality would be revealed. And the British press and Fleet Street was all over the guy. So, little vignette of what might have been, if only, but certainly BP and all oil companies behave, generally speaking, to the lowest common denominators all the time. And I think we all know that the BP Horizon spill happens routinely offshore Nigeria and around the world in different places. So what I wanted to talk about a bit was to bring it home to Canada, to deal with not the things that Geoff has shared with you. Thank goodness I have a long enough list that there are additional things to tell you about how much of a joke our oil and gas regulations are in this country, so that no one will be under any misapprehensions that when Stephen Harper tells you we have the toughest oil and gas regulations in the world, Geoff very charitably said he either is wrong, which would suggest he doesn't know, or he's lying. And I suggest he does know and he's lying. So our oil and I mean, there's no point in hedging on this. This is a critical issue for Canadians. Does the Prime Minister tell us the truth when he says, we have laws that are so tough that this could not happen here? No, he isn't. Now, what kind of regulations do we have over oil and gas? First thing is the regulating institutions as a group. We have the National Energy Board, and that's usually all anybody focuses on, is the National Energy Board. But coming from the Maritimes to having moved to British Columbia about a year ago, I find that very few people know that most of the offshore oil and gas activity in this country is under regulation by institutions that can be described, it's a technical term, but I will use it, Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse regulators. They are, have you ever seen them, Geoff? The Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, the Canada Newfoundland Offshore Petroleum Board. They have their own set of regulations, their own approach. I worked for years to stop the development of inshore oil and gas within the Gulf of St. Lawrence. When you get home, take out a map, you'll see it's really an inland sea. It's completely surrounded. It's very fragile. It's a hugely productive marine area. It's the most important fishery in Atlantic Canada, and it is surrounded on one side by Nova Scotia, up around the other side by New Brunswick, come down through the Gaspé. The western shore of Newfoundland and Labrador covers that bit, and you've got Prince Edward Island in the middle. If you ever had oil or gas spill in there, it would just wash across all the shores back and forth and be disastrous. But of course, the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board and the Canada-Newfoundland Offshore Petroleum Board have a dual mandate to regulate oil and gas and to increase oil and gas activity in the region. They are promoters of oil and gas. They put out large sections of seabed, and they are up for bid, and corporations can get them for a song, and then the amount they pledge is actually considered to be paid to the province in their exploration costs. And as soon as they bid on a big area, their stock value goes up. And I've never before in my life dealt with a regulator that lies. The Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, I don't use the word lies a lot. I seem to be using it a lot tonight. I don't know. And by the way, I have to apologize for being late. It was because I took the ferry and then the bus, because I live in Sydney. So by the time I got into downtown on the bus, it was really late because of traffic. So I could have been on time had I burned more fossil fuels, but I trust you'll forgive me. So anyway, Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, I actually went through a year and a half consultative process that was forced on them by the Minister of Natural Resources at the time, Ralph Goodale, to try to get them to stop this hell-bent for leather opening up of the Gulf of St. Lawrence to oil and gas. And at the end of a year and a half, in this multi-stakeholder process of fishermen's organizations and First Nations and environmental groups and the oil and gas companies and government regulators, we actually had come up with a consensus report which managed to identify the levels of acceptance of various things. I think you've probably heard that our regulations require relief well drilled in the same season. No, they don't. No, they don't. We have gone through our regulations recently, and the Harper government, and instead of having regulations that say anything as an absolute, we've changed them from what are called prescriptive regulations to what are called goal-oriented regulations. And goal-oriented regulations say every oil and gas operation will be environmentally safe. You can read it on the Canada Gazette in detail how they describe the problems with prescriptive regulations, such as a relief well must always be drilled in the same season, because such a statement constricts the ability of corporations to be creative. It keeps them from using new and better technologies when they might occur. It also keeps them from using less acceptable technologies when they occur. So it's more of a case-by-case, region-by-region basis within which they develop the rules.